This video is brought to you by AmerUSA.com, where you can screen tenants 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In this episode, we will be discussing Texas Landlord Tenant laws. The following is a summary of landlord tenant laws in the state of Texas as they apply to residential rental property. Topics include disclosures, withholding rent, the right to enter, security deposits, eviction, increasing rent, and more. Required disclosures. Contact information. Either in the lease, a separate written document, or posted on the property, the landlord must disclose the name and address of the property's owner or management company. Security equipment requests. If a landlord wants tenant requests concerning security equipment to be submitted in writing, this requirement must be in the lease in either boldface type or underlined. Parking policy. If the landlord has a parking policy, especially involving towing violations that apply to a tenant in a multifamily property, the landlord must give the tenant a copy of the policy before the lease agreement is signed. The copy must be signed by the tenant, or it may be included in the lease, but the clause must be titled Parking or Parking Rules and be accented with all caps, an underline, or bold print. A tenant's remedy for landlord neglect. A lease must contain language in underlined or bold print that informs the tenant of the remedies available when the landlord fails to repair a problem that materially affects the physical health or safety of an ordinary tenant. A list of such remedies are provided in the upcoming section titled Withholding Rent. Security deposit limit. Residential security deposit amounts are not limited by Texas statutes. Deadline for returning a security deposit. The deposit must be returned within 30 days after the tenant vacates. However, if the lease specifically requires advance written notice of moving, the deposit doesn't need to be refunded should the tenant fail to follow such a stipulation, as long as it appears conspicuously in bold print or underlined. Late fees. A late fee policy must be included in the lease and must adhere to the following. Fees must be reasonable and cannot begin until 1 day after the rent was due. The landlord may begin with an initial fee and then accrue a daily fee for any subsequent days the rent remains unpaid. Increasing rent. A 1-month advance notice is required for month-to-month rentals. Changes made to a lease agreement of a longer term must be in writing and agreed to by both parties. Withholding rent. If a landlord fails to provide essential services, the tenant has the right to either repair and deduct, terminate the lease, or obtain a judicial order that the landlord make the repair, reduce the rent, and pay the tenant damages, including a civil penalty, and even pay the tenant's court costs and attorney fees. Terminating tenancy and eviction. Failure to pay rent or holding over allows a landlord to give the tenant a 3-day unconditional notice to quit, unless the lease specifies a different amount of time. Other lease violations allow for a 3-day conditional notice to cure or quit. The right to enter. Although Texas doesn't address a particular amount of time, a landlord should provide the tenant a reasonable notice of entry before being permitted inside the unit. For more information, additional laws and articles can be found at AmericanLandlord.com.